Hello everybody and welcome to Old School Tribes. Today we have got Goblins, which is certainly the largest old school tribe of Magic and has got some amazing interactions. It's also a competitive tribe, so you often see them in tournaments and pretty much in all formats. They're still a thing today. And that's an amazing and hilarious tribe. There's a lot of humor in those cards. They are very flavorful at the same time and fun to play.
I would like to share some great progress. We have got one more Patreon. This is Eric. Eric, thank you so much for the support of this channel. And I would like to remind you all that my current goal is to get to 10 patrons by the beginning of October. And we are currently at rank 2, which is Harloon Minotaur. Definitely a great improvement over the previous Squire. So this is the road from Camel to Leviathan, from 0 to 10 patrons.
So, first of all, let's talk about the original Goblins printed in the earliest sets, such as Alpha. And here we start with Monsters Goblin Raiders. It doesn't get any more vanilla than this, because this is essentially a Merfolk of the Pearl Trident counterpart, just 1 mana for 1/1, and has this specific type. And nothing else to mention about them really, because 3 goblins are just 1/1. Nothing special. People sometimes use them when they really need to get as many goblins as possible in order to use some kind of synergy, such as with Goblin King or other cards that pump goblins, but very frequently we see them getting replaced by some more stronger cards that actually have some useful abilities. And here we come to this very important feature of Goblins, which is the sense of humor that is definitely attached to many of those cards. We look at the flavor text, and I remember that when I saw it, I think I was around 11, and I didn't really read English that well back then, but I still understood the hilariousness of the flavor text here. It's just fantastic. And we will see this further on, that many goblins have this idea that they cannot do things properly. So if you ask them to do something, such as fly, they would eventually, mess everything up. And speaking of the card, by the way, it's not a terrible thing, because yes, they could have been 1/1 flying men, essentially, or script sprites, but red isn't that good when it comes to smaller flying creatures, and it's absolutely fair. So this card still sees some kind of play, and it's really amazing. Next, we've got Goblins of the Flarg. So Goblins of the Flarg have this very interesting negative ability. So yeah, number one, they have Mountain Walk, which is nice. Very often it's irrelevant because we've got Goblin King, or at least we hope to have Goblin King, but still, here we do have Mountain Walk built in. And Goblins of the Flarg will be buried if you control any dwarves. And that's quite interesting, because normally you wouldn't see dwarves and Goblins of the Flarg in one deck, maybe just in a limited environment. Today, this is basically irrelevant. Next, we've got Goblin Digging Team, and notice the similarity in the flavor text of Goblin Digging Team and Goblin Balloon Brigade, because yes, they first tried to do something, but then they realized that there would be some consequences, and maybe it's too late. Speaking of the card itself, the art is amazing. Ron Spencer, definitely instantly recognizable. And I like not only this goblin that we see here in the forefront, but also this guy, which looks like a goblin zombie or something. And here in the background, we also see some weird things happening. Maybe the wall even is starting to collapse here. And nowadays, of course, walls don't see much play, but again, there is nothing really to lose here, because 1/1 for 1 mana. And goblins, and again, don't forget that often we will have them pumped in some way, so they would be a bit bigger than that. So having this small kind of an ability without actual drawbacks is perfectly fine. So this is a nice card as well. Also, one of the goblins that we usually see in competitive decks. Next, one more goblin that costs 1 mana, and this is quite a weird one. I don't really see this card very often, and we will see what ability it has. So when you are casting an artifact, you may tap these goblin artisans, but again, since they are artisans, they have a high chance of destroying the artifact essentially. So they can counter your artifact, essentially casting the artifact blast spell on it, or you can draw a card, which I think is quite good because you may have a late game Mox and you don't really need some kind of an artifact, and then why not try and gamble with it a little bit. Of course, it's a coin flip card, so never highly reliable or actually highly competitive, but still. Next, we have got the king himself. So, Goblin King, incredibly powerful, costs 1 more mana than Lord of Atlantis, and this is quite interesting because normally blue creatures cost a bit more than red creatures for the same kind of abilities, but still, this is not too expensive, and Mountain Walk, yes, is usually quite relevant, so definitely very good. Of course, we shouldn't forget that it is a lord, and these lords have been errated nowadays. So today it is also a goblin, and his text says that other goblins gain +1/+1 and mountain walk. So if he is alone, then nothing happens. He only pumps the other goblins. But if there are 2 goblin kings, then they will give each other +1/+1. Next, we've got rather interesting things from the dark, and these are multicolored goblins, and we shouldn't forget that back then the creators of Magic didn't think that making cards multicolored should imply that they should be a little bit more powerful or at least cheaper for the same kind of power level. So here is just Swamp Walk for 2 mana, and yeah, they look quite disgusting, even though it's Quentin Hoover, so the style is still amazing, but I think it is by design. Yes, they're quite ugly. Nevertheless, I have never seen this card being played, and I don't think I ever will, unless somebody decides to kind of spice their deck up, and they're saying that they count as a black and a red card. Essentially, we understand this by the rules, so it's not really an ability, and I wouldn't even say that it's necessarily a good thing, because it could be a drawback if you have some kind of white knight, for example, fighting against it. So Swamp Walk, yes. And this other goblin, which again has absolutely no abilities, is just a 2/2 vanilla for 1 red and 1 green, and the art is amazing. Ron Spencer again, but this is pretty much where it ends. The importance of this card, though, is that it is a 2-drop, and if you look at all other goblins over here, you will see that we only have Goblin Rocksled, which doesn't even count, and very often in some kind of slide decks or even Goblin Tribal decks, we would see some 2-drop just for the mana curve, which is not a goblin, which would be a pity. So this is a goblin if you want to be consistent, if you want to pump them appropriately. So that's Scarwood Goblins. And next we've got Goblin Rocksled. So Goblin Rocksled is an amazing card if we look at the flavor text. I mean, not flavor text, but flavor of the card itself. So 3/1 for 2 mana with Trample, which is a very good deal, but here come the drawbacks. Cannot attack if defending player controls no mountains. This is not as easy as fulfilling the requirement for islands, for example, where people have got splash for blue power very frequently. And also, they don't untap during untap phase if they attack during your last turn. So essentially, it takes a long time to climb back to this mountain and slide down, hitting your enemy again. So you understand how it is supposed to work. It doesn't really see much play either. Next, Goblin Hero. So you see that goblins are a little bit overcosted, because 2/2 for 2 mana could have easily been a thing, but they decided to make it a bit more expensive. There are no drawbacks, though. This goblin doesn't really see much play, and if it does, then it's not going to be a 4-of, because it doesn't fit the mana curve so well. Next, we have got Goblin Wizard, and very expensive in terms of money card. It is a reserved list card, and the ability that he has is very interesting, because he essentially can cast a goblin for free, and it's even better than casting because it can be countered, right? So this is the effect that we later saw in Timmy Power Gamer, I think, in Unglued. We also see this in Elvish Piper and Ethervile if we go a little bit down the road. But again, what is important is that it is a card that allows you to cheat goblins into play, casting them for free, and again doesn't really count as casting. And of course the major disappointment is just 1/1, but we remember that in those days very frequently the creatures were normally costed based on the abilities that they had rather than the stats that they had. So 1/1 for this is probably one of the reasons why it doesn't see almost any play, but also give them protection from white, and it doesn't even require tapping them. So essentially he can give all of your goblins protection from white, and if you are playing against a white heavy deck, that would be a major advantage. So next we have got some Fallen Empires goblins, and also some amazing support cards, many of which you actually are familiar with, I'm sure. So number 1, we've got Goblin Turgeon. Yes, not sure how to pronounce this name. I understand that it is a kind of a surgeon, you know, but slightly different. And what he can do is that he can sacrifice a goblin to regenerate a target creature, just 0/2. And again, you understand that goblins are bad at what they do, so they're not professional at all. So yes, essentially killing a creature to heal another one is what they do. Actually looks like a kind of a zombie ability maybe, but yes, these are goblins. And this card virtually sees no play either. Again, it's very important that this can happen for just 0 mana, and I think that technically sometimes it could be relevant. We can imagine the situations where it is relevant, but the problem with this card, it just doesn't really attack unless it's pumped, and probably people just don't want to waste slots on this card, the slots in their deck. Next one, this card, however, does see some play. So we see the goblin here riding the boat, and it is Tom Warnerstrand, who is awesome at drawing different kinds of boats, ships, and such, and also the sea. And it has Island Walk, as you can see. So yes, Island Walk, definitely relevant, and does see some play as a sideboard card. So at the beginning of the attack, you should pay 1 red, or any creatures blocking or blocked by it will gain first strike until end of turn. Yeah, this sometimes happens as a kind of a drawback, and I don't think it's going to be a big deal because people are not usually going to play too many of these, and you would likely have some spare red mana, so I don't think it's going to stop you very often. And then again, since it has Island Walk, normally we wouldn't even expect them to be dealing with those blockers very frequently. Next, let's talk about the support cards. There are some awesome things there. So number 1, of course, which requires no introduction because it's a staple, and it's a card that is still being played even today in more modern formats. That is Goblin Grenade. So Goblin Grenade, I will give you the time to admire the amazing altar by Dan Frazier himself. So as you can see, here is the fuse, here is the fire. We see some smoke here, which even goes beyond the frame. And the goblin in those goggles, it's a really fantastic altar. I love Dan Fraser's altars, and his sense of humor is just amazing. So yes, and actually I do like the Ron Spencer art as well, and Christopher Rush. All of them are nice. Yeah, they all look fantastic. But again, the card itself is just so powerful. Sacrifice a goblin to have Goblin Grenade deal 5 damage to 1 target. So 5 damage is incredible, even with an extra card that you should sacrifice. Again, most goblins are just so cheap. It's 1 mana or even less. I mean that sometimes it doesn't even cost you a card, as we will see, because we've got some token generating cards, and Goblin Grenade is just awesome. So that's why when you have Fallen Empires, when somebody's playing Atlantic or Eternal Central rules, in Old School Magic where Fallen Empires are allowed, we will very frequently see goblins with this amazing Goblin Grenade. I think actually that even if it was just 4 damage, not 5, I think this card would still see some play, but with 5 damage, this is just fantastic. Next, we've got these counterparts, we could say, Goblin Shrine and Goblin Cavern. So how they work is that they are not just enchantments, but they should enchant a land. So as long as target land is a mountain, this is the offense card. Basically, this is the defense card. All goblins get +1/+0. So if Goblin Shrine leaves play, it deals 1 damage to each goblin. This is quite interesting because we know that land destruction is quite prevalent in old school Magic. So this doesn't come free, and it's a bit of a pity because, you know, could have been a bit cheaper, or maybe it could have been just an enchantment, not something that you should put on the land. So as an aura, doesn't really work well. It actually sees very little play for that reason. And here we have got an enchant land again. So if it is a basic mountain, if the land that is enchanted, then all goblins would get +0/+2. So 2 toughness might be a bit better, and also doesn't have this drawback that we see over here. So if it leaves play, it doesn't deal 1 damage to each goblin. And again, 1 damage to each goblin, maybe it's not such a big deal if you have got Goblin King, for example. So they will all be above 1 toughness. So just fun cards to play, you know, if you want to bring a little bit more fun to your game. Next, we have got some more obscure cards. This card has, however, been reprinted. It's a very popular effect. So I've got all 4 arts here, as you can see, from Fallen Empires. So Goblin War Drums. Each attacking creature you control that opponent chooses to block may not be blocked with you than 2 creatures. So yes, notice that I still put this card here, even though it's not really a goblin card. So goblins here are not mentioned. They're not exactly affected, but still, since it has goblin in the name, I couldn't just overlook it. And today, this ability has been keyworded as menace. So essentially, you're usually expected to have more creatures than your opponent does. And by attacking like this, we don't really even care if some of those smaller goblins get blocked and killed. The idea is to have a lot of creatures and swing every turn. And essentially, you're trying to get your opponent by playing the numbers game. So there it is. Goblin War Drums. My favorite art is probably this one, right? The art by Dan Frazier. And yeah, all of them are nice though, and this card doesn't really see much play, and again, doesn't have to be in goblins, but in goblins it would actually be quite relevant. Next, one more thing with goblins in the name, but again, not even necessarily goblins are relevant here. I mean, it doesn't really mention goblins specifically, but here is the text. Target creature you control which cannot have toughness greater than 2 gains flying until end of turn. So essentially, yes, you launch them, and at the end of turn you flip a coin. And if you lose that coin, you bury the creature. So as you can see, again, bottom line is goblins are not reliable. So this guy doesn't look reliable either, to be honest with you. And yes, essentially, it is super risky. Kind of a Stone Giant effect, but Stone Giant kills it for sure. And last but not least, this is the card that really does have goblins in not only the name, but also in the text. And for 3 mana and sacrificing 2 goblins, you can put 3 goblin tokens into play. This is a great mechanism. This is a great mechanic because essentially it allows you to generate more goblins, but it's a little bit too slow, sadly. It is a little bit too slow. Again, we can imagine some kind of a mana flare deck, right? Or just a deck where you have a ton of mana with some acceleration, and we understand that you could actually use it many times per turn. So it's an enchantment and doesn't tap. So if you do the math, you will understand that by paying 6, you will actually be able to sacrifice 2 goblins and get 3 goblins, and then sacrifice 2 of those new goblins and get 2 more goblins instead. So yeah, for 6 you'll get 4 goblins instead of 2. And yeah, this can go pretty crazy. I have tried using this card with not much success, sadly, but again, it's an enchantment. It's not going to be easy to destroy, so quite an interesting card. So there it is. This has been quite a long video, but there are a lot of goblins, and all of them are super fun. Some of them are more powerful than the others. Some of them are more tournament worthy than the others. So there it is. This was our probably biggest tribe we have reviewed on this channel, and definitely more tribes of old school magic will be coming up soon. So let me know what you would like to see, what are the tribes, and let me know what goblins you actually like when it comes to old school and not only old school. And right now I just want to say thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos, also even including goblin videos, because we will have a goblin deck, we will see how it plays, and we will see some games involving goblins here on this channel.